The day began like any other for Lucas. The 24-year-old, recently hired by the prestigious Meridian Bank, walked through the glass doors of the imposing building in the city's financial center. The cold air conditioning enveloped him, contrasting with the suffocating heat outside. His steps echoed on the polished marble floor as he headed for the elevators. Something in the air seemed different that morning, a subtle tension that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Lucas entered the elevator, pressing the button for the 42nd floor. As he ascended, he adjusted his tie and took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. It was his first month in the new job, and he still felt like a fish out of water among the bank's veterans. The elevator stopped on the 38th floor, and a middle-aged man entered. Lucas recognized him immediately. It was Carlos Mendez, one of the bank's executive directors. Mendez cast a cold look in Lucas's direction, who mumbled an almost inaudible, "Good morning." The executive merely nodded, his eyes fixed on the elevator doors. When the doors opened on the 42nd floor, Lucas quickly exited, relieved to escape Mendez's intimidating presence. He went to his desk, turned on the computer, and began his daily routine of system checks. As part of the IT security team, his job was to monitor and protect the bank's vast network against cyber threats. Lucas prided himself on his skills as an ethical hacker, the same ones that had led him to win this coveted job. As he scrolled through the system logs, something caught his attention, a series of unusual transactions, all occurring outside business hours. Intrigued, Lucas began to investigate further. The more he dug, the more disturbing his discoveries became. There seemed to be a pattern of fund transfers to offshore accounts, all carefully disguised to appear legitimate. Lucas's heart raced when he realized the magnitude of what he was seeing. This wasn't just a system error or a security flaw. It was fraud on a massive scale. Lucas looked around the office, suddenly paranoid. His colleagues seemed absorbed in their own tasks, oblivious to the digital time bomb he had just discovered. He considered immediately reporting his discovery to his supervisor, but something made him hesitate. What if he was misinterpreting the data? What if it was just a legitimate operation that he didn't fully understand? Doubt gnawed at him, but he knew he needed to be sure before making any accusations. With fingers trembling slightly over the keyboard, Lucas continued his investigation. He tracked the transactions, following the digital trail through a complex web of accounts and shell companies. Each new discovery made his stomach sink even further. There was no doubt now, this was a sophisticated scheme to divert funds, and whoever was behind it had access to the highest levels of the bank system. Time seemed to distort as Lucas delved deeper and deeper into the digital rabbit hole. He barely noticed when his colleagues started leaving for lunch. It was only when he felt a heavy hand on his shoulder that he abruptly returned to reality. Looking up, he found himself face to face with Carlos Mendez. The executive's face was impassive, but his eyes shone with an intensity that made Lucas swallow hard. "Lucas, isn't it? I need to speak with you in private," said Mendez, his voice low and controlled. "My office now." With his heart pounding in his chest, Lucas followed Mendez to his office on the floor above. The room was spacious, with a panoramic view of the city, but Lucas barely noticed. All his attention was focused on the man in front of him, who was now closing the door with a soft click. "Sit down," Mendez ordered, indicating a chair in front of his desk. Lucas obeyed, his legs trembling slightly. Mendez sat on the other side, his eyes never leaving Lucas's face. "You're good, kid. Very good. You discovered our little secret in record time," said Mendez, a cold smile forming on his lips. "Now we have two options here. You can join us, earn more money than you ever dreamed of, or..." Mendez left the sentence hanging, but the implied threat was crystal clear. Lucas felt the blood freeze in his veins. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. "You don't need to answer now," Mendez continued, leaning back in his chair. "But know this, if you choose not to cooperate, There are ways to make you disappear. Accidents happen all the time, don't they? Lucas nodded mechanically, his mind spinning with the implications of what he was hearing. Mendez dismissed him with a wave, and he left the office in a state of shock. Back at his desk, Lucas tried to process what had just happened. He was trapped in a nightmare from which he couldn't wake up. The following hours passed in a blur. Lucas tried to maintain an appearance of normality, aware that he was being watched. His mind worked frantically, trying to find a way out of this impossible situation. He couldn't simply ignore what he had discovered, but he also couldn't report it without putting his own life at risk. It was then that an idea began to form in his mind. If he could gather enough evidence, irrefutable proof of the fraud scheme, perhaps he could protect himself, but he would have to be cautious, extremely cautious. One misstep and all would be lost. With a new purpose, Lucas returned to work. He began creating a detailed record of all suspicious transactions, carefully disguised as part of his normal tasks. Every line of code, every transfer, every account, everything was meticulously documented. He knew he was walking a tightrope, but it was his only chance. As the day progressed, Lucas felt the weight of the secret he carried. Every time a colleague approached his desk, he felt a jolt of panic. Every email, every call seemed like a potential threat. Paranoia began to set in, making him question every shadow, every look. Near the end of the workday, Lucas received an encrypted email. His heart almost stopped when he saw the sender. It was from Mendez. With trembling fingers, he opened the message. It was a series of instructions detailing how he should help cover up the next fraudulent transfers. The reality of his situation hit him like a punch to the stomach. He was being dragged into the scheme, whether he wanted to or not. Lucas looked at the clock. 6:30 p.m. The office was almost empty now. He knew he needed to act fast. With renewed determination, he began working on Mendez's instructions, but with a twist. While executing the requested actions, he subtly inserted code that would create a hidden record of all activities. It was risky, incredibly risky, but it was his only chance to build a case against the fraudsters. The hours passed, and Lucas continued working feverishly. Each line of code he wrote was both a lifeline and a potential death sentence. He knew he was playing a dangerous game, but he had no choice. As the night wore on, the office fell completely silent, except for the soft sound of his fingers on the keyboard. It was around 10:00 p.m. when Lucas heard the sound. A soft click, almost imperceptible, coming from the direction of the elevators. He froze, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Was there someone else on the floor? His heart began to beat frantically as he tried to distinguish any other sound. Silence. Maybe it had just been his hyperactive imagination. Lucas took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. He turned his attention back to the screen, determined to finish what he had started. But now, every little noise, every shadow in his peripheral vision made him startle. It was when he was about to finalize his work that he heard it. Footsteps, unmistakable now, slowly approaching his desk. Lucas felt panic rise in his throat. He quickly minimized all the windows on his computer, his finger hovering over the power button. The footsteps stopped. Lucas could feel a presence behind him, the air heavy with tension. Slowly, he turned in his chair, his body stiff with fear. There, in the dim light of the office, stood Carlos Mendez. His face was partially obscured by shadows, but Lucas could see the cold gleam in his eyes. Mendez took a step forward, his expression unreadable. "Working late, Lucas?" Mendez's voice was soft, almost friendly, but there was an underlying threat that made the hair on the back of Lucas's neck stand up. I was just finishing up some things," Lucas stammered, his mind racing to find a plausible explanation. Mendez leaned over Lucas's desk, his eyes scanning the computer screen. For a terrible moment, Lucas thought he had left something incriminating in view. His heart was pounding so hard, he was sure Mendez could hear it. Dedication is an admirable quality, said Mendez, straightening up. But don't stay too late. You never know what might happen in an empty office in the middle of the night. With that, Mendez turned and walked back to the elevators, leaving Lucas trembling in his chair. The sound of the elevator arriving and departing echoed through the silent floor, and only then did Lucas allow himself to breathe again. He knew he couldn't stay there. With shaking hands, Lucas began to gather his things. He saved his work on an encrypted flash drive, carefully erased all traces of his activity on the office computer, and prepared to leave. In the elevator, descending to the ground floor, Lucas tried to organize his thoughts. He had evidence now, concrete proof of the fraud scheme, but what to do with it? Going to the police seemed like the right thing to do, but what if Mendez had connections there too? And what about his own safety? When Lucas left the building into the city night, he felt exposed, vulnerable. Every passing car, every person on the sidewalk seemed like a potential threat. He clutched the flash drive in his pocket, feeling the weight of its contents as if it were made of lead. Lucas began to walk quickly, with no clear destination in mind. He needed a safe place to think, to plan his next move. As he walked, he couldn't help but look over his shoulder repeatedly, certain he was being followed. It was when he turned a corner that he saw it. A black car, parked across the street, with its headlights off. Lucas slowed his pace, his instinct screaming for him to run. The driver's window began to lower slowly. At that moment, Lucas made his decision. He turned and ran, his footsteps echoing in the empty streets. He could hear the sound of an engine revving behind him, the noise of tires on asphalt. His heart was beating frantically as he zigzagged through alleys and side streets, desperate to shake off his pursuers. Lucas ran like he had never run before, adrenaline fueling every step. He didn't know where he was going, only that he needed to escape. The city lights passed in a blur as he moved, the sound of his labored breathing and the footsteps behind him filling his ears. After what seemed like an eternity, Lucas finally stopped, leaning against a wall in a dark alley. He was panting heavily, his chest rising and falling rapidly. The silence around him was deafening. Had he lost them? With trembling hands, Lucas took the flash drive from his pocket. There it was, the key to exposing the entire scheme, to ending the corruption he had discovered. But at what cost? His life was in danger, that was clear now. There was no turning back. Lucas closed his eyes for a moment, trying to calm his turbulent mind. When he opened them again, there was a new determination in his gaze. He knew what he needed to do. With decisive steps, he left the alley and plunged into the city night, carrying with him the weight of a secret that could change everything. The distant sound of sirens echoed through the streets, mingling with the noise of night traffic. Lucas disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a mystery that was far from being solved. The day that had begun like any other had transformed into something much darker, and the repercussions of these events would continue to unfold long after the first lights of morning touched the city's horizon.